I'm going to, hold on. I have to put this comment in the thing. Thank you. I'm going to shut up. Bye.
You scared me.
Checking audio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you with us today. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour, always a general discussion of production and IT-related topics where we answer audience-submitted questions. So your questions truly drive the show. As you learn more about Office Hours, you can figure out how to get your questions in to get them answered. Second hour after the finished of the first hour is typically a deeper dive into a topic. And today we're looking really forward to this. Our second hour is going to be focused on the one-button studio. Our longtime Office Hours colleague, Guy Cochran, here in the panel at the DV store, has been pursuing this for many years. A commercial installation for people who need to do streaming in an environment where they want to reduce the complexity of the launch down to a single switch. Jason Jenkins will be joining Guy today to talk us through the hardware and software they developed to make this complex process super easy. So it should be an extremely interesting second hour. And that takes us to our first hour, however. Mitch, it is time. What have we got today?
Thanks, Bill. Good morning. And our first question's in from David Barton in Memphis, Tennessee. David asks, good morning, panel. Does anyone have experience licensing music for the use over Zoom? I found options for in-person use, but Zoom seems to be harder to cover.
We're going to start with Chris Fenwick this morning. Good morning, Chris.
I was not aware that Zoom was some special space that was different than, anything else, broadcast or corporate or, playing in a ballroom at an event. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I will always take the opportunity to talk about licensed music to kind of plug. I'm a huge fan of premiumbeat.com, mainly for some of their back-end features. I also like the music, but I'm very curious to hear what everybody else says. Boy, that sounded really cheesy. I apologize for that, but I do like Premium Beat. I'm interested to hear what everybody else says about licensing via Zoom.
Okay, well, David Paskin's going to have his opinion in. David?
Yeah, I don't think there's an issue with Zoom, especially because Zoom is it's internal, as it were. Now, if you're streaming from Zoom to another platform, then of course you have to follow those regulations. There is an Epidemic Sound. They have 3 different plans, and the personal plan allows you to go to YouTube or Facebook or things like that. The commercial plan does mention that the music is covered for social media online platforms. Maybe that's where Zoom falls, and websites. So you may want to look out at Epidemic Sound. But if you're just sending music into a closed Zoom meeting, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Mitchell Hill.
For now, Zoom expects you to self-police, and their basic policy on TOS is, and I'll read part of it, you may not post, modify, distribute, or reproduce in any way copyrighted material, trademarks, rights of publicity, or other proprietary rights without obtaining the prior written consent of the owner of such proprietary rights. So basically what they're saying is that you need to be able to make sure that it's acceptable, because somebody may come back on you. They don't have bots and things like that the way YouTube does that are constantly monitoring private conversations. And there's no way to do that in sense on Zoom, because somebody may have Spotify running in the background or some kind of music from a radio that kind of leak in a Zoom call. That's more likely to happen. As far as music goes, specific music, if it's library music, it's pretty easy, like the aforementioned Premier Beats or other companies allow you to purchase the rights for streaming social media. On the other hand, if you're using an actual song that's a hit song, there are 2 licenses that you need to pursue, and they're complicated to get them. One is for the publishing rights to the song, the people that wrote the words and the music, and the other part is the mechanical, or the actual recording itself is usually owned by the record companies. Without both of those, you're not technically legal as far as playing that music over any media of any kind.
And to make it even more complex, as if it isn't complex enough already, there's a third style of rights called synchronization rights, if you are going to take a existing song and put it against visual content. Copyright still is one of these weird things. There's a lot of good laws about it. If you want to learn more about the technically accurate way that it works, Stanford University has a site about fair use, which is one of the most complex parts of this, because it is the use of copyrighted material in small things for criticism and other things. People get that wrong all the time, and they think that what they're doing is fair use, and it's actually not. It's commercial use. If you want more information, there is one company that I've worked with in the past, and I haven't for many years, but it was called BZ Rights and Permissions in New York City. And they are experts, and there are other experts around in following the path as to who owns which rights to a piece of popular music. When you see something like Nike using the Beatles or something like that, one of those organizations who truly understands the entire rights chain, those are the professionals they tend to go to research who owns what and what you need for your use. It gets pretty complex in there. Chris Fenwick?
One last thing, very quick story. It may be an old wives' tale. I believe it to be true. Story I heard about a corporation that decided they didn't need to worry about all that licensing nonsense, and they used a piece of popular music in one of their corporate videos that was playing in a ballroom at a hotel. When a gentleman approached the front desk of the hotel, was checking into the hotel, also happened to be a lawyer for the licensing company, heard music for one of his clients, walked down the hallway, and that company ended up paying large sums of money because they had illegally used the music. You need to take this stuff serious.
Yeah, there is a huge industry built around that. I don't know if you've ever walked into a restaurant and you hear pop music playing in the background. There is a whole chain that just goes into restaurants that allows them to do that, and they have to have often ASCAP and BMI licenses in order to play the libraries of the artists that have contractual obligations with those things. That's why it gets so complex. Mitchell, you have other thoughts?
Yeah, the Restaurant Association has their own negotiated rates with the record owners and the publishers. But generally, you're right. They have to have a publishing from BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, and then there's a few others that are small. And the other thing with fair use, got to be careful with that, because people tend to interpret fair use in a way that's that supports their particular use of it. So I'd be very, very careful about using the words fair use, because that gets the lawyers' bristles up.
Yeah, it does. It's one of the most misunderstood things that we run into. And, this is all under the headline of risk management. Whether you're a small business or you're working for someone who has significant resources, if you don't get this right, your risk goes up. That it's not just a strike on YouTube or something like that. You can literally find yourself in court trying to defend the fact that you didn't have the right rights and you used this, and it can be a sticky wicket, so pay attention to this.
Don't mess with the music police, folks.
Yeah.
That's the advice we can give.
It's a long-time industry, and they have a lot of people, and they make their money by tracking down people who are not doing this the correct way. So forewarned is forearmed. Let's go to the next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York, asking, morning, guys. Looking for a discrete buy once, cry once option with an extensive pickup pattern. Lav mic for interviews and talking spots. What would you all recommend?
Let's start with Guy Cochran this morning. Guy?
Yeah, for interviews, I'd say one of the most popular is the Sanken COS 11D. It seems to be out in most people's kits. Mitchell's holding one up. The question I would have is, why would you go with that versus a hypercardioid or a shotgun? So it depends on the environment, because the capsules are so small that, one, they can have self-noise. So the better the mic, if you have like a $50 mic, when you hook it into a system, you might hear some hiss. So some of the higher-end ones, like a DPA 4060, a Countryman B6, they don't have as much self-noise, and they're also things like waterproof or sweat-proof, so that you could completely submerge these microphones. Also, the mounting. Popular microphones like the Sanken COS 11D will have a variety of, like, it comes with an RM11 in the kit, which is a little rubber mount that you can use to tape underneath somebody's shirt. So if you want to bury the thing, you want to be aware of the frequency responses. And so there's different microphones, like DPA will have a couple different lines where if you're going to bury it, it has the ability to have a little bit higher end boost. So it depends on how you're going to use that lavalier. But also, are you going to, what's your chain? Are you going to put it into a wireless transmitter? Because then you start to talk preamps, and what is your chain going to that microphone? Because that's going to be the other thing about great sound is, are you boosting it with something that is going to be clean? Because I was amazed when the Sennheiser G3 first came out, how much better that it sounded compared to just plugging a lavalier directly into a cheap camera. The preamp gain stage was so clean, it took away the hiss. So if you plug that same ME2 stock mic that comes with a G3, G4 into a basic camcorder, you'll hear what I'm talking about. It's hissy and noisy. So it depends on the chain. So I would be looking at wireless that is decent. Sennheiser G4 is like base level. Some of the Rode Go is a little iffy. I'd probably be leaning more towards something higher end, even a used Electro kit if you can. So those are some things to think about.
Mitch Hill.
Yeah, basically, I was a hand model there for Guy's discussion of it. He did a great job of covering it. You used the term in your question, Mike, about extensive pickup pattern. I can only interpret that to mean an omni pattern, and that is the correct mic to pick, because the problem with the supercardioid, unless you're in a very noisy environment, is that as soon as they turn their head to the left, they're going to get a little drop off. In fact, a lot of drop off. And Omni is going to pick up pretty much everything around the head, so they can be talking to somebody over here and have it all on mic.
John Preto.
Mike, if you like to cry, you can buy the Shure Accent system, or you can fly to Las Vegas and borrow mine.
There you go. All sorts of responses for you, Mike. Hope that worked. Oh, Guy has the last word. Guy?
Yeah, and that pickup pattern, there are some cardioid lavaliers. You want to be careful with those. They're not really too well received for interviews because, yeah, as Mitch was saying, they can turn. So depending on how you mount them, if they turn, the subject will fall right out of that pickup pattern. And as for the head turns, some people will mount lavaliers. I've seen them mount them way too high. And so when you look at the distance from the mouth, when they turn their head, it's rather dramatic. If you mount it a little bit lower, more around the sternum, or even, mid-sternum would be the appropriate spot. So then as they turn their head, the distance is still about the same. It's not dramatically different, because there's this thing called the inverse square rule, which we don't have to go into, but basically you're doubling the output when you have that same distance. And then if you double the output, double the distance, you're losing half your output. So you got to be careful about those head turns.
Actually, the square part of it is if you double the distance, you're losing 4 times. And if you triple the distance, you're losing 9 times. So it's a big deal. And why it even works in these short distances. And that guy's exactly right at his explanation of this. I think we took care of that. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael asking, the Logitech Blue Sona has a supercardioid pattern along with a dual-diaphragm capsule, internal humbucking coil, and internal shock mount to cancel out vibration. Would there be other mics with such anti-noise vibration features?
Jeffrey Powers will start us off. Jeff.
When it comes to the noise canceling option, I don't believe there is anything out there, but there is a lot of shock mount. For example, well, first of all, you have a dynamic microphone, and that's what this is a dynamic microphone. And the off-axis rejection on that is just crazy on any dynamic microphone. Think of taking a balloon, putting it on top of here. That's the area that you're going to talk at. And if you try to talk in any other direction, it's just going to cancel it out. Now, this is an SM58. One thing that, if you ever wondered, you have the SM58 and you have the Beta 58. This, for more off-axis rejection, you want to do the Beta 58, because if you notice, it's got a little shock absorber. In fact, if I took my finger and did that, it moves it around, whereas the regular SM58, it's just pretty solid. That's where what you're going to get in that. I don't see a reason to have the Blue Sona unless you're like in a really noisy environment for that noise suppression, like maybe a conference or something like that, or if you have a really noisy room, you're in the subway or something, maybe then this will really work. But it's just an extra feature that just seems to be a little bit too much.
Mitchell.
Yeah, it claims to have an internal DSP, which talks to a app that you have to run on the computer with it for noise reduction. Pardon me. And the only problem with anything that requires a pairing of a piece of software with the actual microphone is that you're stuck with that system. Whereas if I were to compare this to the microphone that Jeffrey had in front of him, the ubiquitous Shure SV7, first of all, it has internal vibration dampening, and it has XLR and USB outputs, which means that you could run an external sound noise canceling processing or whatever, either in a preamp or in some other thing, maybe not so much in the USB. The only bad thing about that SV7 or MV7, excuse me, that Jeffrey has there is that for some reason they didn't put any kind of vibration assistance in the actual mount to it. It's a hard mount to that boom. So all the vibration assistance has to come inside the microphone.
Nice. All right. We've taken care of this question. Time to move on to the next one.
Andy Korkendorfer is here from Viera, Florida. We have execs that have been set up with proper mics on LP arms. I guess that's low profile. But they often join with Bluetooth or other mics, not realizing that Zoom has automatically chosen the wrong mic. Is the way to remotely control which mic is connected? Is there a way to remotely control which mic is connected for a speaker?
My suspicion is not yet. There may be one coming in the future. Oh, Guy, do you have any direct knowledge?
I'm pretty sure you could do that with Zoom OSC as the client, that you can switch microphones, but with the regular standalone Zoom client, you cannot. You can see what they're using. If you have a Zoom business account, you can, in the back end, you can see what their device is called for their webcam and for their audio device, so you can see what they're using if you have that option in your back end. But as far as being able to swap the mic, you would have to tell them, can you click that little triangle down in the bottom left where it says mute and switch microphones.
I'm just going on the fact that I've heard over and over again, which mic are you on? And having somebody direct somebody to switch it. David, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I'm on Guy's suggestion. I'm peeking into Zoom OSC, and there is a set mic action which you can pull in. Let's see what that actually has underneath it. So you need an ID. I'm not sure what you would put in there. But it does seem like you can set someone's mic through Zoom OSC.
So it looks like there is a path to get what you want, Andy. We'll keep our fingers crossed. And if you get it solved, come back and share with everybody what you managed to do to make it work the way you want it to. Let's go on to the next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking, how did your last conversation with ChatGPT go? Did it scare you, make you laugh, or edify you?
Jeffrey Powers will start us off here.
I've just been having a lot of fun with it. It really helped me out when I was doing CES stuff because I could create articles and not word for word. I would create basically wireframe articles of the products and be able to pull them in and then kind of spin them myself with my own words. So it was a nice little framework, and for somebody who does all this all by themselves, it's really nice to actually have that little bit of help. I've also done a couple songs on ChatGPT. Once again, really fun, but you need to do a little bit of editing.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, this morning before the show started, we were asking it a few questions. We asked it what was office hours global, and unfortunately, because the data is from before 2021, there wasn't anything. It brought up something about Y Combinator, which must have been a different group. So Jonas had access to the new Bing version, which I looked into it. You got to set Bing as your default browser, so that I'll wind up getting it later on. But basically, his reply from Bing was much more accurate because it can reach out to today's data, and so it was fascinating to see the difference in Bing. And Microsoft did make an investment in OpenAI of, I believe, 49% of the company or something along those lines. 49 billion. John's giving me a thumbs up. So yeah, it's an interesting technology. Yesterday we were using it in a meeting, and I asked it a question, and everybody was like blown away about how fast that it gave the reply and that how accurate it was. I asked it for a top 10, and it gave a great top 10. I mean, it could almost be a blog post on its own. So I might do that in the second hour. I might open it up because I asked it what are the top 10 video production mistakes, and it was pretty good to see what it said.
Nice, John Preto.
Just wondering why Paul asked this question. He knows the answer to this question already. So AI is going to disappear into all the applications, and Microsoft did invest $11 billion in OpenAI for 49%. It was a loan. They're paying that money back, and they end up with 49% equity in the company. But it's going to disappear into all our applications. So it's soon you'll have it built into Word, Excel. They already announced Teams integration, and I can't wait for Photoshop and Illustrator. If I can bring a multi-layered image into Photoshop, it's going to be spectacular. And Adobe's being really quiet right now. It's really interesting.
Mitch Hill.
I was freaked out as a neo-Luddite that, first of all, ChatGPT had no idea who I was. We did a search on my name. I didn't, but Guy did. And then we went to Bing at Jonas's suggestion, and it knows all about me. So I can no longer hide from the overlord above us.
Yeah, I've never had any success with that because the Prime Minister of Canada at one point was named Bill Davis, so I can't get a search result from anything. But Chris Fenwick, finish it up.
Do you find it interesting that when you do the chat, what is it, GPT? I almost called it something else, that it types it out? Why do you think it types it out? It types out the answer. Is it trying to make me think that there's a really smart person on the other side typing it out to me really quick?
It's messing with you, Chris.
That is a chosen user interface. Why do you think they do that? I find it suspicious.
Yeah, it's like a teletype throwback.
They only do that to you, Chris. Nobody else gets that.
Yeah. Paranoia aside, let's move on to the next question.
Yes. Anyhow, I'm just feeling a little weird. Bo Cordell from Charleston, South Carolina, asking, looking for a wireless lav microphone pack that allows for a return IFB channel. Is there an inexpensive all-in-one, or do I just need two pairs of a Rode Go type system?
Bo, it depends on your budget. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Zaxcom, which is one of the early digital players, had a bidirectional system because it was one of the first all digital, and they really built it out. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's something I would try. Zaxcom starts with an X. So do a search on that. They do high-end wireless. And I think they had something with a talkback circuit in it at some point. Let me come back sometime and let me know if I'm remembering correctly. Next question.
Just so you know, it's ZAX.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry.
Yes,
right.
no problem. Fine. Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana. I've seen some really nice pop-up shelves and Pelican cases, but have been unable to find a good source for them. Any recommendations?
Pop-up shelves. That's interesting. No, the rock and rollers have a lot of shelf options, but I don't think I've ever seen them even for the larger Pelican cases. Jeffrey Powers, have you experienced with that?
I haven't seen anything, but I do a lot of building of my own shelving in Pelican cases. I find that it's a lot easier than trying to find something that I have that will fit the need that I need for the Pelican case. And then, of course, I have these, which are really nice to hold different things. They become carrying areas and shelves in themselves.
Yeah, that's why I spend time in fishing, like sporting goods stores, looking for the right poly cases for the little connectors and things like that. David Paskin?
Yeah, I'm looking. I can't find it right now, but I've seen it circling around on social media recently, an all-in-one, given today's topic, an all-in-one Pelican case that has so the camera is in there, and you just open the case, and then a shelf comes out, and there are two little metal arms that swing up and lock the shelf in place. I think it's a custom build that someone made, and they're selling it. And it's a nice little, if you're on the move, it's a nice little case to carry.
Interesting. Jeffrey Powers?
Are you talking about Junaid's other company that he's working for, where you basically open up the Pelican case and you put the camera right on? There's like a second camera, so you can do all your presentations from remote. I don't remember the name of the company, though.
No, I think I saw something a little different, but probably the same idea.
I remember it used to be a company called Kata. I don't know if they're still around. They're out of Israel, and they made Kata bags, and they had a really good, solid internal system. And in some of their tall bags, and I used to have one that I carried on location, the bright yellow inserts that were the typical Velcro inserts to allow you to wall off things. I used to be able to keep that bag horizontal, tall, and then use those as ways to pull out things like headphones and things like that. It's kind of a shelf system, not really a formal one. So it sounds like you're looking for something more sophisticated than that. But good luck. Let us know, Chris, if you found something. Bring it back and share it with everyone. Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Paul says, is there a network attack storage that lets you slide hard drives in and out without mounting them on a tray, pardon me, and has at least 5 bays, Ethernet, USB-C, USB-A, etc.?
Tom Ferguson's going to start us off. Tom?
Well, there is. Drobo makes a 5N2, but that's been out in the wild now for, over 5 years. And the drives don't actually pop out very good because it just has a spring behind them. Now, you take something with a tray like Synology uses, the drives snap in. You don't need tools, and it gives you a little leverage on that drive, and they actually mount much firmer. So I prefer that.
Sounds like good advice. Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, QNAP, Synology, they all have hot swappable bays that, as Tom said, they pop out. Other than that, I'm a big fan of building my own NASs. I just built one a few weeks ago, and you can always get a if the motherboard allows for a hot swappable, you can always, and I know you can go up to Amazon, you can find these things. They're basically trays, a tray system that you can put into a case and then have the hot swappability as any other NAS.
Nice. Mitch Hill has some thoughts about it.
Just a quickie vote for mounting it in a carrier because, for example, this is a DX115, which we'll see in some devices like HP, things like that. And you need the little fan that's in there that services it because these drives will get hot, especially in an enclosure. And it locks in and does a great job. The only problem is that the fans sometimes fail, and they're noisy, whiny things.
Noisy and whiny are generally not good words when we're trying to do production. Let's move to the next question, though.
From Chris Fenwick in Emeryville, California, and here in our panel, what do you suspect is the reason why various people in our community have such different experiences with Elgato Lights? Please discuss.
David Paskin.
Well, I like to live on the edge, and so I use Elgato Lights, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. If I had to guess why, it would be because they're overpriced. Well, I'll stop there. No, look, they're very nice lights. The problem that I run into all the time is the connectivity, right? When they decide to connect to my computer, when they don't, when the Stream Deck, almost every day, the button on the Stream Deck doesn't see the app running on my computer, and I have to quit the app and start it again. It is absolutely flaky. But the lights themselves, when they work, I like.
There you go, Chris Fenwick. Oh, sorry.
What I was going to say is my experience, much like what David is saying, and two people actually not with us here today. Nigel loves them, no problems. Jack, our security officer from the rocket shoot, has them, hates them. My experience is I bought it for probably a year, no problems at all. For about 6 months, I couldn't get it to acquire through the software at all. Turned out it was me. Then read the instructions, got it to acquire, worked fine for another 3 or 4 months. And in the last 5 days, I have had to reacquire through the software using the instructions, probably a dozen or 15 times. And it keeps dropping.
Mayhaps your process of reading the instructions last might have some effect on this. Just suggesting. I don't know. Let's move on to the next question.
And moving on to Douglas Carmichael asking, I've fallen in love with Waves NX to make long sessions on headphones a lot less fatiguing. Would DearVR Mix or Slate VSX be a useful non-Waves alternative for headphone monitoring?
Mitchell.
I'm a little suspicious of anything that's placed between your ability to hear the raw audio and the source of it. I guess it's interesting. Obviously, Waves knows what they're doing. But what happens when you have to go somewhere else and plug into another system with the same headphones? You're not necessarily going to have those Waves nearby. So I'm thinking that unless it's part of the headphone system itself, it's probably not very practical.
Yeah, I kind of the headphones are an individual thing. People have different sound profiles that they like. And we've talked 1,000 times about the fact that one of the most popular headphones out there, the Sony 7506s, and they're used everywhere in production. They are not particularly good music headphones. They do have a pronounced presence peak in kind of the upper mid-range and pretty enhanced bass. And those two things are really good if you're trying to say, is there rumbling or is there some wind noise in a signal? And are people being articulate in the signal I'm recording? Are they getting their S's and T's said correctly? That little presence peak helps you identify those things. Both of those features, which are really good for monitoring the human voice, are not particularly good for monitoring music. So I would not use them as my music listening headphones, but those specific things have made them incredibly popular for monitoring sound in the field, for example. So this is truly a personal thing. I think you just got to try different headphones until you find something and you go, that's the sweet spot for me. That's exactly what my ears want to hear, and I can get all the information out of this signal that I'm looking for. Let's move on to the next question.
Matt DeVries in Washington, D.C. asking, do you think that power line adapters are better than Wi-Fi for Zoom?
Ooh, this is a tough call. Power line adapters better than Wi-Fi. Mitch, you want to try to decode this?
Yeah, I'll take a swing at it. Any type of wireless technology, and power line is basically wireless in a sense that you're depending upon imprinting a signal on the power line in order to receive it. I know it sounds like gobbledygook, it probably is. But I just generally don't think anything is as good as a hard Ethernet connection. We've just seen problems with everything else.
Oh, I now I understand. So it's the system that encodes an actual signal into the AC carrier somehow. And okay, Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, so basically what this is you have two units for a power line system. You have one unit that plugs into the room that you're in, and you have another unit that plugs where your router is, and then you use a Ethernet cable and, of course, the power in your house to run the whatever data to the area. The problem is that when you go to send out any type of data, it will go throughout the whole house. It's like trying to go through a maze, trying to figure out which direction it's going. So if you have any problems with your power, you could lose packets, you could lose speed on that. And so, but with Wi-Fi is getting a lot better. but you're also having to deal with all these devices starting to attach to your Wi-Fi. So there's a lot of give and take, and it's all individual use and what works best for you.
Makes sense. Tom Ferguson had a thought too.
One more problem is if your two devices are on different phases of your electrical box, that means that your connection has to go back to the electrical box, then back into the house and get to the second device. There could be a whole lot of noise in between those 2 points.
Makes sense. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Paul says, there was a Blab reunion on Tony Mobley's show. What was the Blab, and when did it start and end?
Sadly, our friend John Preto had to leave. He had an appointment this morning. He was there in the early days of Blab. He's talked about it a good little bit. Sounds like it was a really fun early chat or communication system. Jeffrey Powers, were you involved in that?
Well, I do his YouTube. So basically, it was not only just Blab, it was also Meerkat. He was doing a double reunion, but of course, highlighted for Blab. He brought on a bunch of people. There was a lot of coming and going on the show from what I saw, and pretty decent. And he had a lot of fun, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, those early social media networks are really charming and sometimes problematic. I've said before, I've told the story of how I was on CB Simulator back in the early days of the internet and watched how people got angrier and more impolite by virtue of the fact that they were not under their own name and under handles. And at that point, I decided to just use my own name on the internet so I wouldn't say anything too horrible that would follow me through the rest of my life. I think it was a good cause. But, these early things, a lot of friendships are made. And clearly, with what happened with John Preto, and they're doing a reunion all these years later, they were connections with other humans that have lasted the test of time. So good for you. Let's go to the next question.
From Zach Phillips in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, asking, do you use the Stream Deck Companion plugin to maintain access to native Stream Deck plugins? Or do you use one device for Companion and one for Stream Deck, or just Companion?
I'm going to start with David Paskin and then go on from there.
Yeah, there is the Elgato plugin for Stream Deck Access. So there are actually two ways to do this, right? You can, if you're running the native Stream Deck software, you can use a plugin from Companion, or you can use this Elgato plugin for Stream Deck Access. I'm running 3.0 already, at the beta, and I'm terrified that it's going to fall apart as it is, although it's been pretty solid for me. And so I use one set of Stream Decks with my Companion, and then another Stream Deck with my the streaming computer, and I keep them separate. I use the different programs in each one, and that keeps everything working.
David, have you ever counted the pure number of buttons you have in front of you? Just curious.
You can never have too many buttons. Here's the problem. The problem is that Jeff Wildren posted the other day that there was a sale on the Stream Deck XL on Amazon, 20% off, which meant I had to get one, even though I don't need it. So I expanded my button count by a third, which is really exciting.
Is your trigger 20%? If anything is 20% and has
my
any
trigger
utility
is
at all?
sale. My trigger is sale.
You are a typically normal human being. My wife should be nodding in the other room at this point. Jeffrey Powers.
So I've always used Stream Deck as the primary layer to Companion, because I've also used things like Central Control, which also is an overlay for Stream Deck. And I've always done split buttoning. Anything that comes from the local machine is usually run through a Stream Deck, whereas anything that has to be, like for instance, when I did my graphics on a different machine, I was using Viscero that went to the machine via Companion. And of course, so with the ATEM and all these other devices now, I can do a totally control from there. In fact, when I do my live show, the computer that I'm streaming from is sitting up here, but everything is running through Companion downstairs with some local buttons from the Stream Deck that go to the machine that it's carrying over to.
Mitchell Hill.
Yeah, plus one on what Jeffrey just said. So to answer your question, you don't need to split them up. You can run them all on the same machine.
There you go. We're moving on to the next question, but I will note that we are burning through our questions pretty fast this morning. We have a lot of questions for the One Button Studio in our second hour. I'm really happy to see that. But we will switch over a little bit earlier if we don't have more general questions. If you want to put some more in, it's a good day to do it. Let's go on. Go ahead.
And David Paskin from Miami, Florida, and on our panel has asked, has anyone noticed a participant's video in Zoom glitching and then reproducing the active speaker's feed in theirs? Any fixes?
I haven't seen that. I don't. Has anybody else? Now, I'm not saying it has anything to do with the complexity of your arrangement, David, but tell us.
No, it's the strangest thing. It's you'll see the glitching or the static on the screen, and then whoever is the active speaker, their video ends up in that person's square.
Wow.
And it kind of comes and goes. It's very odd behavior. I've seen it on 2 or 3 different users. My best guess would be that they need to update their Zoom client, but I wasn't sure if anyone else had seen that. It's not just me seeing it. Everyone else in the meetings is able to see it as well.
Are your Zoom, ATEMs all up to date? I'm wondering how old they are, because I've noticed a few little anomalies, and I've had this ATEM for, almost 3 years, 2.5 years since they first came out.
This ATEM, I don't think it has anything to do with the ATEM, because I stream through software on my computer, or I go to Zoom through software. So,
yeah, well, that may be a conundrum. So anybody who has some thoughts on this from anywhere in the world of office hours, toss in a note and maybe we can help David out. Sorry, we couldn't cover it right here on the panel. Let's go on to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, would a white-colored or black-colored mic look more professional on camera?
That's Jeffrey is going to start us out. What do you think?
What do you guys think? I'm running a white camera or white microphone on my
Not
camera.
professional.
You're kind of
at
half
all.
and half there.
Yeah.
You've got
I'm just horrible. So if you're really worried about it, I know that there's a company out there that actually makes skins for things like the MV7. You can change it to whatever color that you want. You can put your own logos on it if you want. So I think it's all about the better sound than about having a mic, because this just seems to be a regular question: is do I look too professional, not professional enough with a microphone and frame? And the answer is, if you're sounding great, then that's the important thing.
David Paskin.
excuse me, I'll just say that ever since I got the Heil PR40, I've regretted not getting it in black. And that's primarily because I'm doing so many other things on screen. I'm bringing in overlays, I'm telestrating, all that other stuff, and having a dark frame makes all of that easier. And so I wish I had done it with the black.
Mitchell Hill.
Jeffrey, I think Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney wrote a song about that SV7, but notwithstanding that, if you want to call attention to your mic, sure, a lighter color is going to work. If you just want it to blend into the background, black is fine. Companies like Sanken that make lav mics now are making lav mics that are the same color or multiple colors, so that the anchors on TV can match the mic to the color of the outfit they happen to wear. So if they got a red blouse on or whatever, the mic can be red. If it's over your skin area, then it can be flesh colored. It's completely becoming a fashion accessory.
There is a thing in the production business called show black. And show black is partially a result of anything you put into a camera shot that is other than a light sink can cause problems for you. Traditional things like shooting cars, very difficult because cars are shiny and they reflect everything. So if what they are reflecting is a bright color like white or a red or something like that, you will see highlights in the car because it's reflective of those things that should not be seen because they are behind the plane of the camera. So show black is a process, and we used to go around a lot and have to kind of use gaffer's tape or things like that to kill specular highlights from things that were out in the field behind where we're shooting. The problem for me is that I remember once I had a big, really comfortable canvas bag that I used to throw a lot of gear in, And one day I was in need of something really fast, and I went in, and like the 10 devices and pigtails and cables and that thing in it were all black. So finding a black thing in a black bag was like trying to find something in a bottomless pit. It took me an extra 30 seconds to kind of go, no, because I couldn't see anything in there. In fact, that's why in ordering bags at this point in my career, I tend to try to find bags that have bright orange or bright yellow backgrounds, because it actually makes it easier to find things in the bag backstage. So white colored or black colored, part of that is the look you want. Do you want it to be present? I mean, people say, how do you mic yourself? And that's probably because my mic is really literally fading into my t-shirt. And that's one of the reasons I chose to wear black t-shirts. I just don't want it to be that present. But it's, these are the things that are aesthetic parts of designing a frame for a shot that you want to do. Mitch, you have a last thought before we move on?
Well, there's one other option is have your mic out of the frames. Mine is right
That's
here.
true.
So it could be any color it wants. It could have a disco ball in it. Nobody would know the difference.
Good point. So hope that answers your question, Douglas. Next question.
From David Paskin in Miami, Florida, asking thoughts on the hop-in versus Zoom events.
We've been talking about that a little bit. I have no experience with either. I haven't noted, but I just like the fact, I always like the fact that when somebody, and Zoom in this case, kind of went into the event space on there, it drags a lot of people behind them. It becomes popular. And then all of a sudden you get competitors. And even if one starts out and stays ahead of the other, the fact that there is competition in these spaces generally improves things for everyone. I have seen circumstances where a product that dominates an industry just doesn't evolve so quickly because there's no competition for it. David, you wanted to weigh in on this?
My very limited experience with these platforms is that they make the case for people like those on this panel to facilitate and produce these events, because I think that they're not for the faint of heart to set up events on these platforms. I'm asking because I'm participating in our panel on Hopin later this month, and while I've joined Hopin as a participant, I've never joined it as a panelist, and I was wondering if anyone had any experience with that.
Yeah, no, Alex probably has, but unfortunately, because he's out of town today, he's not here to weigh in on this. Complexity. I think most of the people who are watching the show right now would be utterly flabbergasted at the amount of complexity there is built in the back end of office hours. There are so many people around the world. There is so much technology. There's so much equipment that goes into making this show possible every single day. And it is constantly evolving. One thing about the entire internet production, broadcast, webcast, however you want to frame it, industry is that it's growing up by leaps and bounds right under us as we're doing it. So I think there's just going to be more complexity, and hopefully some portions of it will become the complexity will be successfully hidden from the end user so that you can use things that are fundamentally complex without having to spend a ton of time learning how to use them. But it's the golden age of what we're doing right now, and it's really fascinating to be a part of it. Let's move on to the next question.
And it's coming to us from Rotem Kish in Mazkaret Batya, Israel. Does anyone have experience with companion and X keys to control ATEM?
Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, I've played with this like last year or something like that. It can be done, but basically what you're setting up your X keys similar to a Stream Deck. And like, for instance, button 1 of the Stream Deck is button 1 of your X keys. If you have let's say you have the 32 button Stream Deck and you want to get button 33, what that's going to do is it's going to flip to the next page. So technically button 33 would be page 2 of the next companion page. I would highly suggest that you look into Central Control, because that's a better paired app for use of the X keys. You're going to have to pay for it, but they've got a lot of stuff, and Joe Max has been working on a lot of cool features that you use with Central Control and your ATEM.
Nice. Thank you. Next question.
Next one in from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Kenny asked, interested in panelist comments on DJI portable microphone system, small compact kit, onboard mic recording, 820-foot range, 2 independent mic systems, in-case charging, interesting features. How does it sound? Product link in Mukana.
David Paskin, do you have some experience with this?
You'll have to forgive me. I don't with the DJI, but it's very, very similar to the Rode Go 2, which I have here, the wireless Go 2, I should say. And I think Guy sort of alluded to this before. It works. It's not the highest quality. I used it the other day, actually, for a second person in here. I put it on, they have a cute little handheld adapter that you can snap this into, the receiver or the transmitter into. And it was okay. It had a little noise, little self noise, but it got the job done. And I think DJI is pretty similar to that.
Yeah, it makes sense to me too. It's really been interesting. You know, once upon a time, wireless microphones came in 2 very large packages. They had a lot of circuitry in them, and they were built kind of on old surface mount stuff. And then I remember reading an article about what was happening in VLSI, very large scale integration of kind of taking some of these circuits and making them very small, driving them with chips instead of discrete circuits. And we started getting classes of equipment that could perform most of the functions of those bigger circuits, but in a very smaller, very less power-hungry fashion. And it seemed to me that there were a lot of companies that leveraged this to come out with less expensive, but still decent working things. And then even the higher-end microphone systems, wireless microphone systems, started getting smaller and smaller, and yet still having really exceptional quality to them. So I think we just benefited in wireless from the consistent improvement in technology for these manufacturers who are doing microchips and things like that, making things smaller and better all the time. There are 2 different tiers of them, and I would never put the pure sound of one of the inexpensive systems directly against one of the highly engineered, highly researched and carefully designed ones. I'm not saying that the small ones aren't like that, but it just seems like they work in different specifications zones because they're after different customers. Some are very price sensitive and some are, I don't care how much it costs, just make it as perfect as you can. Jeffrey, you had some thoughts on this?
Yeah, the 820-foot range is pretty subjective. If you're at home and you're running around your house, that's one thing. If you're at a conference, I don't think you're going to get to 820 feet. However, with the mic recording on the mic itself, being able to transfer that audio over and then rejoining with whatever you're doing, if you're doing video or if you're just podcasting, then that's actually a good saving device. I do like that. I've always wanted podcast microphones to actually have a self-recording option in them. So this is really decent item if you're not doing any type of live streaming.
Makes sense. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Jeffrey, for Kenny, and thank you, Kenny, for the question. Let's move on to the next one.
James Haldane from Vancouver, Canada, asking, did anyone attend the webinar yesterday, NDI Webinar ATX, Wi-Fi Joe, and BirdDog? The webinar did not work on my system. Choppy audio and video. Did it work for anyone else out there? Why did they use Goto Meeting?
Guy Cochran.
This is why I love what we do every day. We're able to, really stress test systems and know that they're going to work every day. So they used Goto Meeting. Who knows why, but they should have used Zoom. Hey guys, if you need a Zoom webinar license, I will give you one for free, NDI.TV, because it was hiccupy and there's a whole thread on it in the Reddit video engineering forum. And Lenny says in there that it was because of the NDI signal going into Goto Meeting, which isn't a normal thing. So they had to do a bunch of capture card stuff at the last minute, and they had a faulty HDMI to SDI adapter in there. And so the recording, I'll put a link to in chat. It looks like it was actually a nice session once it got underway. There's the CEO of BirdDog. So I'll put a link to that and you can watch it. But again, be aware you want to test and make sure your platform's bulletproof, but go with the standards. I mean, all these exotic ones that nobody uses can be dangerous. So be aware.
It's always weird to me when I see people using AirPods as their IFB and or monitor on that level of show. I mean, I know a lot of people do it, and I know it works, and a lot of people are happy with it, but it always seems to me to be, I don't know, risky, I guess is how I would feel about it. But maybe I'm wrong. Let's move on to the next question.
David Paskin in Miami, Florida, here on our panel asking, speaking of attending webinars, has anyone tuned into any of the Streaming Media Connect sessions?
Nobody's raised their hand on this, so it looks like maybe nobody has out of this panel. David, did you hear anything about it specifically? What were you interested in?
Yeah, I did. I went to the one that Alex spoke about. The content was very interesting. The entire time was wishing that they had just let Alex produce it, so that it looked more like office hours. And then I went to one last night, which I thought was going to be about specific tech tools or gear, and I'm not quite sure what it was about. I sort of tuned out. I don't know. I mentioned earlier I'm participating in this panel later, and it's specifically about digital streaming and this kind of stuff. And it worries me that those who profess to be doing this professionally in the business aren't worrying about how they are presenting themselves in these conferences. That maybe they do it for others, but they don't do it for themselves. Attending these conferences that are just not up, maybe we're all just spoiled. Maybe we're just spoiled.
I don't think so. I think you're hitting on something. I mean, why would you go to a conference of tailors in ill-fitting clothes? It doesn't make any sense to me, and yet we're still seeing this. And I understand there's kind of still this glow of streaming is a new thing, but we've been doing it for 2 years here, and the industry has been doing it longer than that. You would think that people would have solved, and some people have. I do go to events, and I see, even if they're not using the same tools we do, I see a level of professionalism, and you can tell that they've taken the time to try to get it right. And it's truly like just showing up appropriately, not in cutoffs and a t-shirt, for a big presentation. I mean, nobody would do that. And yet we still see these professional presentations done by large companies with large budgets and resources, and they come in as if it's your grandma from Cincinnati doing her first Zoom call. It's just a weird thing. I don't know what's going on. Mitchell, you want to say something about it before?
Yeah, I just want to throw one more metaphor in there. Plumbers with linky faucets, things like that. I can't wait till Alex gets back, so I'm sure we're going to hear a ruthless review of their performance, and we hope that they get the message.
Yeah, and the question for him is how, do you confront them in the middle? Could you go into the lion's den and say, guys, you're doing this wrong? That is difficult for people to hear. And the personal relationship management and not getting out too far ahead so that people stop listening to you because they think you're just being critical and don't understand that, no, you've actually spent a lot of time trying to figure out what can help them succeed better. And you're doing your honest best to tell them what you've learned about what actually works. I mean, that is an act of kindness toward those people. And sometimes it's very hard, to present to somebody, this isn't working. And it's,
well, in a sense, we're sort of contributing to the confusion because we set a very high level, our bar, for the quality of our video and the quality of our sound and the quality of our broadcast, et cetera, so that when we see things failing for other people that are below our bar of acceptance, we're very sensitive to it, and we generally react to it. So it's not always fun to be the top level of quality everybody points to and says, that office hours program, they do a great job.
I don't know if it's even the top level. One of the things I learned from my time in corporate, change is hard. I went through seminars, and I recorded seminars for companies just talking about change in a big organization and bringing in professional speakers to try to speak to all the levels of the organization, the executive class, the middle managers, the line employees, and their vendors and everybody else about why change was necessary and how difficult it is to get people to do it. I mean, we all feel comfortable when we think we know when we're going to get up in the morning and do something. We know all the processes. Heck, it happens to me every day. I come in here and I'm finally, after, almost 1,000 shows, I'm pretty darn comfortable with knowing each switch I have to push in this relatively complex thing I'm doing at home to get onto office hours. And everybody here has gone through that same climb. In fact, we'll be talking about that here in just a couple of minutes and talking about the one-button studio, trying to make something that is inherently a complex process super easy so that there is no barrier and you take all the friction out of being able to do it. But I'm seeing that, I saw that all the time in my corporate practice about, the execs knew where they wanted to go, but to get buy-in from the whole organization and to get people actually to change their habits and build new habits was always a challenge. And I think that's just human nature. I think that's part of what we'll have to face. I see new faces in the panel and some traditional faces, and I'm happy to see everybody here. I am mumbling a little bit because I wanted to try to get to the top of the hour. We got about 3 minutes left to go, so I think I'm going to go ahead and dive into this a little bit earlier. We were saying that for a long time, our dear friend Guy Cochran has been talking to some of us about this idea of the one-button studio, and he's assembled a group of professionals and people around him to try to make this real, and we are going to get an update on exactly what this is. I hinted a little bit about it with the idea of trying to take a complex process, which is I'm in a corporate environment, or it could be an individual, but it could be a business, could be anything. And these systems tend to go into organizations, I think. We'll hear more about that from them. But something that is really simple, that somebody who is not technically proficient and doesn't spend all of their time, like most of us here on the panel do, thinking about technology, can have a really valuable resource so that they can hit a button and essentially webcast as appropriate to an audience, and something that takes a lot of the confusion and complexity out of that process. So, Guy, I know you're here. Do you want to introduce your fellow presenters here and tell us kind of what you're going to be going through?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. We have this just profound, how can I explain it? Piece of equipment that we've been working on for 5 years, and it came about out of necessity, and it was because people were making mistakes with video, specifically students. So it originated at Penn State, and people wanted to just make it easy for students to just go in, rehearse. So it was mostly recordings, so that, remember when you had to get in front of the class and you had to deliver a presentation and you'd get nervous, that kind of thing. So they wanted a space where people can go in and try it out. So they would record themselves, and then they would either get feedback from instructors, or some instructors were letting them, instead of going in front of the class, put this piece up in front. So when we looked at it, it came about for us because we saw a lot of product called Reflec Media, and we saw a lot of it shipping to Pennsylvania, and we're like, what the heck is going on in Pennsylvania? So the original system used this green screen product called Reflec Media, and we shipped a bunch over there, and then we figured out that they had like 9 of these studios on their campus because students just kept needing them. So when we looked at the build list, we were like, wow, that's a lot of stuff that teachers have to buy. And so we bought one. We bought the original, well, we bought all the pieces of the puzzle. So the original one was like a spreadsheet that just said, go buy this microphone, go to Best Buy and go get a camcorder that's $200 or $300. And so you can imagine a $200 or $300 camcorder, it wasn't that great of a look. So we built one, and then Jason, who I'm going to introduce here in just a sec, is kind of the maniac with the just mad scientist who took this system and said, I can make this better. And so, Jason, you want to jump in and talk a little bit how you built that first one and what you found?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, our original concept was to base a commercial product on Penn State's model. As you may know, they opened it up. It was just kind of an open source thing for them. You could use their app, you could use their list of parts, but there were still some barriers there as far as having to source all these parts from different vendors. There was a custom cabinet that was part of it that took 6 weeks to get, and all these different pieces to bring it together. So we just started the process by building one and ordering all the parts and pieces and putting it together and waiting the 6 weeks for the cabinet and the whole deal. And so I put one together and just started testing it, and realized that the app hadn't been updated in a few years, and there was some, like the hardware button for starting the recording wasn't actually compatible with the newer version of Mac OS. And I noticed with the app, there was like a 1 to 2 second delay in because they were running it through an H.264 encoder from Blackmagic Design, and so there's quite a delay on what you were seeing. You weren't really seeing live video, and anyway, so there's just a number of issues that led me to the conclusion that I couldn't use that system. I couldn't sell it. Let's put it that way. I wasn't comfortable selling it as a package. And so, having been involved in video production for 20 plus years and having gotten into live video and being a big fan of the application mimoLive on the Mac, I thought, you know what? I bet I can build something that's going to be a little better using mimoLive. So that's what I set out to do. And and 5 years later, here we are. And it's been an interesting ride for sure. But it's really fun to be able to. I
suspect you're skipping over some steps when you just say, and 5 years later, here we are.
Just a few.
Just a few. We'll talk about some of the specific things, but I noticed that we have other people in the panel, and John Idelson is here and Cyprian Lomax is here. Are you guys, have you come in because you use the system, and is that what's going on? Cyprian, I haven't seen you in quite a while at office hours.
Yeah, it's been quite a while. No, I'm an example of what not to do. I watched office hours in the early days, learned a lot, went ahead and set up a studio. We set up something in our space, and we watched it being used, but not particularly very well. So that's my position.
Fair enough. And John Idelson, it's good to see you again. You haven't been here in a while.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And Cyprian really didn't say all that his connection here. Cyprian and I are both part of a group called ELI, which is the EDUCAUSE Learning Initiative. We were research fellows for a year. And he wrote a piece about the 7 buttons, 7 facts about the 1-button studio, which I thought was an interesting combination. But we're here because we're educators who used them. When I was at CSU Monterey Bay, we were setting up various ways of recording students so they could practice and demonstrate proficiencies. Almost every campus has a general ed course, which is speech, and you need to get in front of a class and give a speech, and then you get critiqued. But it's lots of students, limited time, and the feedback always isn't as robust if they had more time to be able to comment on it. So many faculty members like to have their students, practice, record it, look at it, improve it, and then they could also give feedback to that recording before the student presents in front of a live audience, or as was mentioned, sometimes students will even just use what they record. So we were involved in the groups that started talking about how do you do this. Lots of campuses use their television production studios, but that required a full crew. Many times the teachers would have to provide their own gear themselves. And so the 1-button studio was a way of making it simple. And it's grown a lot from the original work that Penn State did.
Guy, before we bring back Cyprian to make sure, bring back Jason, to make sure that we understand the flow, can you talk to us about your original list of what were your goals for this?
Yeah, the mission of DV Store is to help people create better video. And so when we saw this, we were like, is this really helping people? And, we're professionals. We want to at least bring them up to the next level. And phones are really powerful now, but you got to remember when this thing started out, there was flip cams. Remember those little flip cams? And I know John was showing them in our meeting yesterday. He's just like, these is what we were giving students, and they would even mess that up. And it's like, it's only got 1 button on it. How do you mess that up? So there is something about the lighting, the audio. So you can put a flip camera, 5 feet away from you, and of course the audio is not going to be good. You could use it with a window behind you, and of course it's not going to be good. So when we started researching this, what would make it easy for somebody to just walk into, you take away a lot of the mistakes that are commonly made: exposure, bad audio. Kids and subject matter experts don't want to learn about the technical stuff that we get into with adjusting ISO and shutter speed. You start saying this stuff and you're speaking Greek to them. So when we started making this thing, we were like, wow, we're making this so that content creators can just walk in, rehearse their stuff, know their stuff, and put out a quality piece. And I don't mean to take away jobs from studio personnel, but I've seen like University of Michigan has a multi-million-dollar facility, and to be able to use their facility, you're carving out a couple people's hours of time, if not days. And for a simple shoot to just sit down, I mean, people just want to walk away with a talking head clip that they can go and put into their presentation or put on their YouTube or put into their course curriculum. And that's what this does, is it just allows somebody to really quickly go in and use it. And so I applaud Penn State for doing what they did to create this thing, but they just left it. Like the software does literally not work. And so they had to pull it from the App Store because people were just complaining. So what we did was we said, how can we make it better? We worked with Oliver from mimoLive, and there's a lot under the hood. I mean, there's API calls, and I mean, it's pretty crazy how many layers. If you were to see the stack, because we've got the digital light board, which you'll see. So basically, there's a Wacom tablet that you can telestrate over the top of video, and just that alone, I'll let Jason show you the cool stuff because I don't want to take anything away from his presentation, but he's got some nifty stuff that came out of necessity. We actually had one of the Zoom execs come by and take a look at it, and he gave us some feedback. And so we've even did things like made it ADA compliant, which was a big thing for access in libraries. So I'm happy that we were able to do those things. So this is iteration version 4. So we're all the way up to 4. The last one being that they came in with I came into the office and they had gone to Staples and they took foam core and they made this mock-up. It looked like a high school, or not even that, it looked like an elementary school taped together science project. And they're like, this is our new product. And I was like, well, scratching my head. They're like, this is what it should be. And the next thing I know, Jason's in this hardcore app, spinning this stuff around and going to Canada and getting stuff dipped in, metal dipped in and fabricated. It's advanced stuff. So the panel that he's sitting in front of, it's custom made. There's cuts and so many extrusions and all that stuff. So we took this thing from being just go to Best Buy and go buy a $200 camera to like some next level stuff. So I'll pass it over to Jason so he could talk.
Yeah,
a little
Jason,
bit more
you had to implement all this. Talk us through the process.
Well, as I said, it really, I felt confident that I could use mimoLive as the software backbone for this, and the bodacious Breidenbach brothers of Boinx, as I like to call them, Oliver and Achim, have been just fantastic to work with. They've added features to mimoLive specifically for this project, this product. They've done some custom coding. We've got another little app that runs that we call the One Button Studio Controller. That's a little go-between mimoLive and some of the hardware. So there's a lot of cool things going on there.
Hey, Jason, if I had never touched this and I just walked into the One Button Studio, what would my experience be? What do I do? How do I get on the air?
Yeah, when you come in, you would actually first see this on the screen, and I can give you an idea of actually what it looks like in here without the studio lights on. So the overhead lights are actually on in this room right now, but this is what the user would see when they come in, and they would just hit the launch button and the lights would come on, and then they get the next set of instructions, which is just to load their presentation. So we've got 2 Mac Minis in the system actually that are running this. One that's doing the recording and the compositing, and the other that is accessible by the end user for loading their presentation and running their presentation. So just for kicks here, I can open up a keynote presentation. So anything that I've just got an NDI screen capture app running, and it's just capturing everything that's on this screen, and it sends it over as a picture-in-picture. You can see behind me. So when there's various configurations that you can make here. So there's a presentation position button. And it's a single button, but what it does is it just cycles through different options for where your presentation's at. So you can actually go full screen completely if you want to. I'll leave it over here. There's actually a camera position button that what it does is actually just moves me around in the screen, so I can make myself smaller. I can get way down here. I can do the kind of the Twitch style head and shoulders in the corner. So there's different options there. And for those this is a feature I recently added because I was getting the request from several customers. They're saying, we've got faculty members that want to present and they want to use the digital light board and they want to use this, but they just don't want to be on camera. And so I was a little hesitant because I hate to give people an easy way out just to not be on camera. But again, you got to listen to the customers. So I have a presenter off button that just takes you out of the picture, right? So you can use all the other functions, you just don't show up. So
now, is that background, the blurred background that you've got back there of the classroom, something that an administrator sets, or do you have some choice over that as you're an operator?
So so what's available to the end user is set by the admin user. So the admin will load in whatever backgrounds they want to be available to the end user, and you can see I'll just cycle through some of my defaults here.
Nice. Not that I ever make a mistake, but let's say I've got up to this point and I'm ready to do my presentation, and in the first sentence I mangle horribly, which is my norm. How do they escape and go again?
Yeah, I'll show you that process. They would hit the recording button. They get a recording countdown, and you can't see it from your angle, but there's actually a recording light that goes on the system. So it's really clear that the recording is happening. And so they would go through their presentation here, click through their slides. If they mess something up, they could simply just hit the button again. The recording stops. And in this system, the file actually gets recorded live to the hard drive of the recording Mac. And at the end of the process, when the recording stops, a copy is made and it's sent across to the presentation Mac, where the user has access to it, and they can just upload it to Google Drive or OneDrive or wherever they want to put it. So that's pretty much it. And then I guess it just iterates number. If you make 2 mistakes, the third one becomes your golden master essentially, and that's what you send out. Yeah, each file has a time, a date stamp in the file name, so it's really easy to determine what which recording is which. You pick the one that's good and you upload it and you're good to go. So.
Now, how much space? You said you have lighting, you have camera, you have the software system and the rest of that. How big a system is it? What size room would be appropriate for an organization to have this mounted or operating in?
Yeah, great questions. So with our Reflec Media, previous Reflec Media system, green screen system, we could get away with some smaller spaces. With version 4, we moved away from Reflec Media for a couple of different reasons. One was they just over the course of a year they essentially doubled their prices, and which was a little bit of a turnoff. And and the other was we really wanted to take the keying to the next level, and so we decided to move to a traditional green screen, which we've got now. We've actually integrated a Blackmagic Design Ultimatte into the system for the best possible keying. You can't tell with me because I don't have any hair, but hair actually looks really good on this keyer. So I'm finally really satisfied with the keying after this many years, and it took just using dedicated hardware to do it. So
would a typical space be maybe a 10 by 20 or a 15 by 20? You know, what's the smallest space you could go into?
This is a minimum space would be a 9 by 12, which is what I'm in right now.
Okay, great.
Here's an example of that. This is the former system. But this is that same room that he's in right now. You get an idea of the cabinet that's there, and this is a Matterport scan. So there's some sound panels on the wall. This is the former system that had the Reflec Media ring there, but you get an idea of the cart, and then we've improved the cart that holds the digital light board, which is there. Then that background was a green Reflec Media background. It looks gray in this picture, but it was actually green screen. So we're updating these photos, but you can see that there's some lighting up top, and there's some sound panels on the wall, and then there's a microphone. But this is about an 8x10 room, I believe, Jason, that you're in right now.
It's a 9x12.
9x12. So that should.
So you don't need a particularly high ceiling or some huge spacious area to install this. You can in a typical office.
It's designed to go into a room with no special infrastructure, just a typical sheetrock walls, drop ceiling grid over the top. So the lights actually hang from the drop ceiling, as does the microphone. Our new green screen is actually from Stretch Shapes. If you're not familiar with that company, they make some beautiful green screen systems. We're using their quick wall system that has these low profile steel stands. And so it's a freestanding green screen, doesn't need to be drilled into the wall. So that makes installation less invasive. We just really tried to make it as easy as possible to put a system in without doing any infrastructure changes, without calling in facilities or an electrician or what have you. So we're using a track system that just screws right onto the existing drop ceiling that carries power to the lights. And we've actually got a 5-light system. So we've got 2 soft boxes up front for key and fill. We've got a backlight as well. And then we have a tube light on either side, which is actually shooting back directly on the green screen to help even things out back there. So
nice. Mitch has a question here on the panel before we dive in to the questions from the audience.
Yeah, Jason, if you don't mind, is it possible to show the device, and could you walk us through it from what it actually looks like as opposed to from the user point of view?
Yes, I can. I've got my phone here, which I also joined the meeting with, and I could switch over to this. I'm getting some interesting. My phone tells me I'm in safe driving mode.
That is required for presentations live coming from a secondary source. This is Murphy's corollary to Zoom presentation. If the phone needs to be on, it will be off.
So, and I have a leave button, and it's not letting me leave.
Well, maybe we should ask some
going
questions
really
while
fast.
Forgive me for interjecting, but perhaps the one-button studio needs a second button.
Allow phone.
I switched to phone button.
Well, so let's just do a couple of questions real quick, and you can have a little bit of time to settle into that. So, Mitch, what do we got first?
All right, first in from the question, Peanut Gallery here. Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana. For non-technical users, what do you consider estimates of training time?
Oh, good question.
I can tell you that when I go out and do installations, I always tell people, hey, let's do a training session at the end of it, and I invite whoever is there that wants to be a part of it. And I actually installed one of these at a middle school last month in Pennsylvania, and did the training and finished it up, and it was like, well, that's about all you need to know. And the gal looked at her watch. She's like, that was only 15 minutes. I was planning for 2 hours. And so it's a pretty simple. Now, obviously, I can dive in a little bit deeper for admin users about some of the inner workings that they might be interested in. So I can end up taking more time. But really, it's really simple to come in and learn how the system works. It actually has a built-in demonstration video, and you hit play demo on the touchscreen, and it just has a 90-second walkthrough that walks you through every step of the system. But every step along the way, there's instructions on the screen, and it's again just made to be really simple. And we've always we've tried to strike this balance of having some nice, really powerful features, having a high quality output, but just keeping that ease of use is really important to our customers.
It seems also to me, when you said admin, I thought, oh, security issues, but you're not really streaming to the internet as much as you're recording to media, so you have control over that. Your goal appears to be to get a usable file that somebody can then embed in their communication. Am I right about that, or does it have streaming and things like that capabilities? And if so,
well, I am streaming right now, right? I'm streaming.
Oh, that's right. You are.
To this meeting. So we have what we call the Zoom add-on, which is actually for version 4, it's an actual teleprompter. So that's what I'm using right now. And as you all know, teleprompters are great for good eye contact with your audience, right? So we actually had a local nonprofit in here a couple of weeks ago that came in to use the system, and they actually just wanted to record some different snippets for their yearly banquet where they essentially asked for money. And so they were putting together a video for that. So they wanted to interview a couple of different people. So we actually had the director of the nonprofit just come in via Zoom on the teleprompter, and she was able to interview them as they sat here, and they were able to have direct eye contact with her and essentially just talk to her and answer her questions. And it was just a really just amazing way of running it versus having her actually in the room and then them maybe looking at her and then not knowing where to look. Like, wait, do I look at the camera? Do I look at her? It just eliminated all that confusion. They were able to look directly at her in the teleprompter, and it worked out really well.
So it essentially has an Interatron function or mode that you can get into. John Idelson had a comment. John?
Well, as you're going to talk about the amount of training, when the faculty members were discussing the idea of how simple does it need to be, imagine that you have 20 sections of an introductory speech course with 20 students each, and you want them all to go in and record a 5-minute presentation. And the faculty who are teaching the speech course or general speech or speech for business or whatever that course would be, there's a limited number of class hours. So you might be meeting for 12 weeks and you might be meeting for a 45-minute class hour. So they didn't want to take the time out of their class time because their subject matter is not how to operate a studio, but their subject matter is how to give an effective or persuasive speech. So that the goal was that a student could walk into a room, load their presentation, make that presentation, record it, view it, so see if they liked it, and if they liked it, then have it on in those days a thumb drive and being able to upload that to the teacher's computer or go there. So the goal of training was to have it where it really didn't need any training. And in the early days, it was basically a thumb drive. The original model, you walked in and you plugged the thumb drive in. It was like a car key. The system lit up and started working. Thumb drives and sneakerware has gone out of favor, but the whole concept is a person doesn't need to be really trained. It's got job aids. So when you walk in, whether you know the system or not, you can stand there and deliver and have that available for both practice and then possibly use and distribution.
Nice. Mitchell also had a comment.
Yeah, I have a question, perhaps for Guy. How do you remote control this device if you're doing like an Interatron and somebody in some other location wants to drive the system?
So we could, as admins, we could come in and we could control the lighting, we can control the camera. So we can basically take over the machine, but that's not for end users to do. But through Zoom, it's great for coaching. It's just like this meeting. You can have somebody inside of a meeting or do a meeting inside of a webinar or that kind of thing where you can, basically, if you have two of them, which is my dream, is for people to have that Interatron look where, like Jason was just mentioning, when we had that lady, the director, come in, she wanted to stand next to the machine and ask questions to the person that was being interviewed. And it was interesting to see the dynamic when I said, hey, why don't you just take my iPad and go into the other room and give him the questions through the system. And you could just see them light up, both of them lit up, and the communication through the eyes, because you could see, every little nuance. And it just doesn't come across when somebody's having to look. And you've been in these interviews where it's like, where do I look? Do I look at you or do I look at the camera? And so these days with this whole Zoom, everybody looking at the camera, it's become this, how do you do it while you're getting those gestures, those facial gestures that are just so important. So we added into the system a 24-inch teleprompter with the Zoom add-on, and it was because of office hours. So I went in to use the system, and I was like, I can't use this in office hours. So the picture that I was showing you with the TV, my eyes were looking like way up, and I was like, this isn't going to work, guys. And so we got a hold of the folks at Teleprompter people, and we said, hey, can you ship us over one so we could test it out? And we just fell in love with it. I mean, it was just like, wow. It was eye-opening, I guess there's a pun. It was one of those things where you when you have something that big and you could see somebody's head the size that it would be in real life, it's natural. I mean, it really feels like you're talking to somebody. So when I say having two of them, I could see, it's almost like a point-to-point communication format, but people can be anywhere in the world. In this example, we were just right in the next room over, but we could already see and feel the difference in the quality of the production just by separating them. And I know Alex has talked a lot about this, but to see it in real life, it's going to happen more and more. So, I mean, if you guys build your own prompter, use an iPad, whatever it is, just know part of this session that this is a thing that is coming up really fast for people to talk to each other through teleprompters. And I know Google's working on some other fancy stuff that is, holographic stuff. We'll see what happens with all that. But for now, I'm just proud to see these things going into a lot of schools where people get to use them, and libraries where there's this whole democratization of equity and access where people could use them that are anybody. You don't have to spend a dime. You just walk in and you use the system. So a lot of these places, you just book time on a calendar, waltz in, use the system, walk out. In fact, there's calendar software that people just use, and they can just check in. Some facilities even have them where, for instructors, they gave them a card keyed access at 24 hours a day. So there's instructors in Tennessee that are going in and creating content whenever they want. They just walk right in, use the system, walk out. So it's pretty amazing when you think of the labor that used to go into setting up a sit-down interview. Audio person, somebody doing lights, producer. It's basically like an automated recording studio where people just walk in, use the system.
So interestingly, with our version 4 system, we're getting really stirring up some good corporate interest. We just recently sold one of our version 4 systems to an AV integrator who is setting it up for a company, mainly for use by the COO. And then we had another guy that flew in from Texas just so he could see the system in person. So he's serious, right? If he flies in. And so he checked it out for a few hours and then had to fly back because he had shoots the next morning. And then 2 days later, he wired money for it. He just bought it. And he's actually going to put it in a trailer. So he's building an entirely mobile one-button studio that he's going to be taking to his customers. So that's going to be a few months because he's custom building this trailer. But that's going to be a pretty exciting use case when he gets that put together.
John had another comment. John Ittleson.
Well, I was just going to mention, sort of, if this is version 4 of the iterations, when the one-button studio was first created, it was meeting a need for a practice recording studio. So there was no thought of Zoom meetings. In fact, pre-pandemic, we weren't doing what we were doing now. And so the system was designed for a student to come in, quickly make a recording, and have a copy of that they could share with students and other members of the community. COVID came and everybody's on Zoom. And so I think that's when, Guy, you and I spoke a little bit about there should be a Zoom room into this. And one of the challenges that the early one-button studio had, it was primarily designed for stand and deliver and not necessarily the contacts that we have now here. So this really is a iteration of the one-button studio that really take in what's currently happening in the field. So students not only need to learn how to make a good stand and deliver presentations that one button studio let them do, but they also need to learn how to do a good Zoom presentation. So now this facility lets them do both. They could And they could just practice it by doing a Zoom presentation to one and look at the recording on Zoom, or they could go and do it actually live. And I don't think the original One Button Studio creators really thought of this being a live production studio, but now it's become one.
And we're getting more and more. I mean, I do corporate mostly, and I can't tell you the number of times I've gone to set up in a CEO's office, and it's a big interruptive process to do that. If they'd had something like this in some room there, the CEO, the CIO, all the rest of the executive team could go in and schedule time and talk to the troops, essentially. And that's 90% of an executive's job, is setting standards and motivating people to achieve them. And I can see this as being a hugely powerful tool in doing that. Let's move on to the next question.
From Jonas Dottel in Stuttgart, Germany. Can the remote control the lights and the camera of a one-button studio?
Jason, do you want to?
So the control panel that I've got here, it will simply turn the lights on or off depending on, when I start the session, the lights come on. When I end it, the lights go off. If I don't end it and I just walk out, after 20 minutes of no activity, the system will shut the lights off itself. So in that sense, the lights are controllable. And as far as the camera, as far as the end user is concerned, the camera is set it and forget it. So that the focus is locked in this particular position. It's framed up a certain way to line up with the green screen. Again, we do have functionality here where I can move myself around the screen to get out of the way if I want to show more of my presentation. But other than that, all camera control would be up to an admin user.
Okay, so that's reserved for a particular class of user. Guy, you had another thought about this?
Yeah, we do have the ability, Jonas. I know Jonas has the same exact camera we're using in the system, which is a Panasonic BGH1, which has an app, the Lumix Tether app, or you can go through a web browser. So for the admin access, if somebody was getting this for a library school CEO suite or for somebody else's studio where they needed to reach in and make adjustments, the lights are aperture lights. So you do have the Sidus Link app, and then you can take over the computer, which means that you can take over the BGH1 and have access to ISO, shutter speed, white balance, focus, audio levels, all the stuff. So there is quite a bit under the hood. We just hide that. That's the idea of one button, is that you forget about all that stuff, and we set it all for you, and so it makes it consistent every single time that you just walk in.
I would love to. I've actually got a technical question. I would love to switch over to my phone and do a walkthrough. However, as soon as I join the meeting on my phone, it goes into safe driving mode and completely locks me out of anything. Is that an iOS problem, or is that a Zoom problem?
Good question. I'm not sure why it's kicking you into safety. Maybe because you have it in that holder. I'm not sure why it would be.
Why does it think you're driving? I've run across driving mode on my phone a couple of times, but usually only when I'm driving.
I'm going to try it again here and see what I can do. But it's a strain.
Well, let's do that. Let's go ahead and jump over to the next question and see if we can.
Perfect.
Give him a little time.
Mike Edwards from Brooklyn, New York wants to know, morning guys, pop the hood. What are the essential components used to create the one button studio?
So who's going to handle what's under the hood?
Yeah, I think this is where Jason really needs to get that. Oh, there he goes. He's popped in.
There's his phone. Yeah, his phone came in as a source. So,
okay, I'm going to leave audio on the main system.
There you are. Yeah, it says connecting to audio. I'm seeing some little notifications, and Jason's head is in vertical video mode.
Okay, should I switch?
There you go. Now you're wide.
That's fine.
You're good, Jason.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna switch my camera around. Actually, I'm gonna put my AirPod.
Whoops, it seems like you have dropped audio and frozen video, so I'm not sure if we're getting a solid signal. It looks like maybe a Bluetooth connection glitch. Pictures come back to life there. You're in horizontal mode there. And I heard a little bit.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Okay, I'm hearing you now. Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to flip the camera around so I can show this off. Okay, I'm going to start at the door over here and just give you a view of what this looks like. So we've got our cabinet with all the goodies inside here. We've got our presentation Mac monitor here showing us my keynote. This is the live view that shows everything, shows the live composite, our program monitor, essentially. And then we have our what we call our Zoom add-on teleprompter up here. You can see that our Panasonic BGH1 is behind here. So we've got our control console here. This is one of my favorite parts right here. It's just the backlit StudioMatic.
Spoken like a product guy. I love it.
So you can see we've got our aperture lights up here. These are the Lightstorm 60X lights with softboxes. So, and then we've got this track, which actually is what's carrying our power to the lights. And we've got another one back here that's just acting as our backlight. And this is our Stretch Shapes green screen. I don't know what to call it except beautiful. It's just so nice the way that it's stretched across the frame there. It just pulls out any wrinkles. And as I mentioned before, it's got these really low profile steel stands, so you can put it right up against a wall if you need to.
Oops, there your audio's back.
We've got these Amaran, aka aperture, tube lights here that are hitting the lower half of the screen. The upper half of the screen is pretty well lit by the softboxes, but we needed a little additional lighting down low to even things out. So we've got those hooked into the system.
Am I correct in that the aperture lights are strong enough so that you can leave the room fluorescence on, and those are overpowering them and still giving you a good picture even when the upper lights are on, or do you have to turn those off as part of the launch sequence?
I designed this to work in conjunction with the existing room lighting.
Makes sense.
Just because it was another switch, I didn't want to have to tell people to turn off or turn on or whatever. I did do some slight modifications to this lighting we have in here because I was getting quite a reflection off of the digital light board. You can see a little bit of that when I'm right over it. It's not bad, but I actually used a strip of gaff tape to cover the output.
Word protection. Love it.
So this is our desk here. It's just a motorized uplift desk, which makes it nice. And I didn't point this out, but you're able to actually plug your own laptop in here, and then with a push of a button, you can change your presentation source and just switch over to your own laptop if there's specific content that you've got on there that you want to show. So that's a nice feature to be able to do that. So this is our little control panel right here. You can see the buttons here. This is easily programmable for different functions if there's anything that needs to be customized. This is actually just this digital light board, and this control panel is actually all part of mimoLive. So this is their painter layer, which they made some customizations upon my request. which is wonderful. Those guys are so great. And this is actually their remote control application here, which is just showing on an iOS device, which is embedded into the system here. So
that's very, very cool. We've got about 20 minutes left. I'll let you finish up a couple of things, but then actually we've still got 10 questions to get through. So go ahead. And anything else you wanted to look at on the system?
Yeah,
itself?
well, this is the one button, right? It's a one button studio, so we have to have one button. This is what does the trick right here.
Nice.
Jason, where do you engage warp drive?
Yeah, it's that button right there. That's what does it. That launches you right there.
Make it so.
If you want to look actually under the hood, so we've got this is the interior. You can actually see the recording light, which is not on right now, but this is back here, and it lights up red, and so you can actually see it through the front of the cabinet when the recording is happening. We've got our Ultimatte here. We're making some good use of some Sonnet gear in here. We've got a Rack Mac Mini holding our presentation Mac and our recording Mac side by side. We've got this Sonnet chassis holding an Echo 3 so that we have our PCI slots. We're running a DeckLink Duo 2 for ins and outs, SDI ins and outs. And we've got our mixer down here, which is bringing our single microphone into the system and USB out into the Mac.
And it's keyed to keep little student hands out of
That's right. Exactly.
Out of doing what students do.
Exactly.
Nice. Let's get to a couple more questions. We've got, like I said, So Mitch, what do we got next?
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, asked, one-button studios are a great turnkey solution for libraries. Have you thought about a portable version?
Ooh.
So the answer to that would be yes, I have thought about a portable version. I actually put together a list of parts that I would need to build a portable version. It was more like a desktop version that you could more easily move around. So it's not something I've actually built at this point. But I guess you could also say what our corporate customer Tanner is doing with the trailer is a portable version, but that's probably not what you were thinking.
Guy, you had a thought about this?
Yeah, we've worked with Oliver a little bit on a portable version. And as Jason just said, the Tanner Hobbs mobile, where he's putting it in the back of an 18-foot trailer is one way, but that's pretty heavy iron. But there was something called the Yellow Box. If you go to the mimoLive site, he's actually going to be showing it next week in Santa Barbara. That's kind of a portable system that's based on mimoLive. It's not a one-button studio, but it's something that worth taking a look at. And it's still a concept, but he's definitely, Oliver's definitely intrigued about what we're doing because we're one of the biggest sellers of his software. So we're a huge proponent, and we happen to just move through one-button studio. So he loves us, and he's done a great job. But he wants to make it a portable version, and we'll see what he shows next week at ACM.
John Idelson had a comment?
Well, I was just going to say, for libraries, it really is great to have them. It's probably one of the best use cases. I call this semi-portable because one of the things is you can actually get the whole system through a standard door, which makes it really easy for libraries to do the installation and have it set up quickly. It's not portable like a sewing machine.
Having done a lot of load-ins and load-outs, yeah. With the 32-inch door, that's not good. Do you have a 36 around anywhere? Sometimes it comes down to just that for getting a lot of equipment in. Next question. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm going to jump in. We actually installed our first one-button studio in a public library just last month in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so it's kind of fun to see that market open up. And really they were all about what they called it digital inclusivity. That they wanted to give anybody that comes into the library access to really high quality presentation recording equipment. And so that was a pretty cool thing to see.
Nice. Next question.
From Chirag Cheetah, Dallas, Texas, are C-suite executives adding the one-button studio to their org, and how are they using it?
Jason, do you have corporate clients who are doing this? I think you mentioned the one. Yeah.
One of the things that we've seen is we had a person that designed studios. He wound up buying one for his client. I believe it's undisclosed client somewhere in Silicon Valley, and they are a C-suite. I'm not sure exactly where they're putting it, but on his website he showed an image of the layout, and we're seeing this more and more. He wrote a whole article about how C-level execs are saying media room to be determined. So some of them are putting them off to the side of their offices where they can just walk into this professional looking studio and then have, glam lighting, so to speak, where it looks good, sounds good. It's already set up. They don't have to mess around with their webcam. They don't have to worry about any settings, but it's basically all done. So we're starting to see those inquiries and purchases by people, not just at a university, but in the C-suite. So very cool stuff.
And John Idelson just popped in for a comment.
Well, they all should have it. Any organization should have a high-quality studio. So you could see this as an insert studio. You never know when you're going to have to be on CNN or some sort of question. And on a regular daily basis, there are all-hands meetings. There are your investor meetings, year-end reports. So having a high-end studio like this that you could walk in and easily use, I think would be important for not only C-suite people, but any organization should have access to something like this.
Seems like it solves a lot of problems. And actually, that reminds me, I was just noticing Cyprian down there, and you said in the beginning that you got interested in this because you ran across so many things that worked wrong when you tried to do it yourself. Could you talk quickly about a little of that?
Yeah, so this might be lost on this audience, but it's incredibly daunting to set up. I mean, even coming onto this, there's so many things that I have to keep track of, right? And so I know that when I'm working with students, and we do a thing called the 3-minute thesis, which is talk about your thesis in 3 minutes, one slide. The thing that, first of all, nobody does it well right off the front. The more you do it, the better you get. And you pretty much need no barrier to entry to get that practice, right? And so something where you go in with one button, just concentrate on the content. Don't worry about the lighting or the camera or where to look. This type of thing really allows educators and students to take control of what they need to present. When Jason was showing the backstory of the hardware, my eyes started to glaze over. I'm sorry, Jason, but really, I just want to make sure that I can get what I need done. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I've seen that a lot too. Even in things like hosting shows here, you don't start to refine your talents until you can do it over and over, and those small iterations. So if you're fighting to get the whole thing launched so you can do it every time, you're going to go do it less. And so that seems to me the main point of this is to make it easy to get your reps in so that you become a better speaker or better presenter on camera. Let's go to the next question.
And it's from John Borntrager asking, are there any ADA compliance considerations? Also, what about multilingual options during the setup process?
Oh, I was thinking about that earlier. Are the menus and things like that translatable, or have you worked in international stuff?
They are certainly translatable. We have sold a few of our systems internationally. However, they've been in primarily English-speaking places. In fact, it's kind of an interesting story. The very first one-button studio about 4 years ago, we had put it up on our website, but I hadn't even finished it completely. It was probably 90% done. But I thought, well, let's put it up on the website, see if we get any interest. And in the middle of the night, this school in Iceland buys one. and I honestly, at that point, I had all but given up on it. I was just kind of burned out in the process of building the first version. But that happened, and I was like, oh, maybe this is a viable product. I guess I'd better go finish it. So I went in and finished it, and we shipped it off to Iceland. So, but to answer your question more directly, that's a great question. Yeah, certainly the on-screen menus could be easily translated over to Spanish or whatever they needed to be for a particular customer, and we'd be happy to do that.
Fair enough. Next question.
Mike Edwards, Brooklyn, New York. Morning, guys. Where would you recommend a one-button studio be put so everyone that needed to use one had access?
Guy?
Yeah, typically these have gone into four-year universities. That's where we've shipped almost all of them to. But last week or 2 weeks ago, Jason installed one in a public library. And so that just really opened up our eyes as to a couple things. I mean, it's my wish to have one in every library in the world. I mean, that would be amazing so that everybody can use one no matter where they live. They can just walk in and know that they're going to come away with a file that is got good lighting, good picture, good video, and that the audio is nice and clean. And if they have prepared and rehearsed, because that's the thing is, you saw that Jason put in a keynote, but you can do PowerPoint on a Chromebook or bring in your own laptop. And Jason will show here in a second, because it's one of the coolest things is telestration over the top. Yeah, there he goes. If you want to cut over on the back end and show Jason's, but basically, the more that we can get these things into the hands of people that want to create video at a high quality, not just with their phone. I mean, phones have gotten great. They're fantastic, but the ability to have a composite that's clean with an Ultimatte. I mean, an Ultimatte was $70,000 a couple of years ago. And now, I mean, you can buy one for $995 and the quality of the key. So we're using the SDI version of the keyer, and we actually had to have, we asked mimoLive to implement.
Guy, I want to talk about that because it's exciting. So as far as I know, we're the first ones to do this at this level. We're actually typically you would take the Ultimatte output, which is two SDI signals, key and fill, right? And you would take that into a mixer, a hardware mixer like an ATEM, and you would do the compositing there. Well, that's my lights shutting off automatically because I'm not recording. So let me turn those back on. So we worked with Boinx, who worked with Blackmagic directly, and so we have integrated the Ultimatte directly into mimoLive. So we're feeding that key and fill signal directly into mimoLive, and doing all of our compositing inside of their software. So that was a pretty exciting advance for us.
No wonder your keys look so good and still do. Next question.
Next question in from Mark Homer in Snohomish, Washington, asking, in prior versions of One Button Studio, were you actually able to use a teleprompter with the Reflec Media ring light?
That cause any issues, Guy?
We didn't use the teleprompter when we had the Reflec Media system because of the way that the eyes, basically you can't put a ring light behind the glass because it'll disperse all over the glass. So you would have to put a monitor below. And it was something to where the eye line just didn't seem quite right. And the Reflec Media system, after staring at it.
We were putting a monitor above, essentially. We were putting a big monitor on the wall above it. So that's one of the reasons moving away from Reflec Media was a good move, we feel, because we were able to then use a true teleprompter through the glass. And so I'm happy with what we've done.
Next question.
From Jonas Dottel in Stuttgart, Germany, how can pro users expand this for their use?
Is there a version that has more controls for that kind of user?
Well, there's a lot of controls under the hood that are certainly accessible for pro users, as Guy talked about a little bit before. You could use any kind of remote access software to get into the system and tweak camera settings, tweak the lighting. I use AnyDisc to do remote support sessions for our customers, but I could certainly do anything while I was in there. So there's a lot of power that's already built into the system. It's just a matter of how you want to use it. It's there, ready to be used.
Fair enough. Let's go to the next question.
And we have one in from Frank Haney in Ottawa. How portable can this be?
I think we discussed that a little bit before. Do either of you want to say where you imagine portability going for this system?
Yeah, this particular system is, I would say, kind of a semi-permanent installation. You are mounting things to the ceiling, and you're hanging lights. You're mounting acoustical panels to the walls. So as such, it's not really meant to just move from room to room quickly. But
to perfectly recreate that, you need a lot of stands and boom arms and things like that. That would be an interesting but slightly more complex build, I would imagine.
Yeah, and we wanted to eliminate as much of that as possible, just because things for people to trip over, and we don't want cords on the floor and things like that in this kind of a scenario if we can help it. So again, for something more portable, I do have a concept for a desktop version, which again at this point has not been built, but it's definitely percolating in my brain. So.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here just because I know that we're about ready to wrap up it. One of the coolest things about this whole thing is the telestration. Jason, we only got 3 minutes. You want to show the digital light board option that you've created?
Yeah, I've done.
How does he maintain possession all the way through, not allow that ball to hit the ground?
So I'll just pause it here. And just as an FYI, I really know nothing about football, but just to give you an idea of what you can do with this, it's easy to just go in and pick different colors and decide what you want to highlight. We've got actually an arrow mode, which makes it easy to point out specific things in a bold way. Anyway,
I like that.
You got a blitz fluid.
First time I've ever seen a blitzing defensive back. That was excellent. Thank you. No. Well done. So telestration is possible. It's built in. Is that one of the add-on modules, or is that kind of stock?
Yeah, this is what we call the digital light board. A lot of our education customers were fond of what I refer to as the analog light board, which I'm sure you guys have seen. It's a big piece of glass. It's edge lit. You use the fluorescent markers. The camera is shooting right through it. The complaints we heard about that is that it's a pain to clean, and you really have to clean it well. Otherwise, the camera picks it up. And then you're limited as far as the backgrounds that you can use in that scenario as well. This eliminates all those issues, and of course is super easy to clean. You just click and everything disappears.
Okay, now the big question here at the end of the presentation, if they need more information and want to talk costs and things like that, where do they go? Who do they talk to? How do they get one of these if they want it?
Take it away, Guy.
Yeah. Oh man, the One Button Studio website is onebuttonstudio.biz or actually .info. Sorry. That's probably the best place. Follow Jason Jenkins on LinkedIn. He puts up some amazing posts. So I would say that that's the best way, and we'll put that in the chat. Those are the two resources I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I like to post installs that I'm doing and things that customers are doing with the system. So yeah, if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, that's great.
Excellent. Guy, Jason, everybody from the One Button Studio, thank you. Great to see Cyprian and John here in the panel. Don't forget, a couple of things coming up very, very quickly here. If there are team opportunities, if you want to be a panelist and think you're ready, there's a link in the Office Hours Makana about joining that. Also, the production team, and don't forget our NAB production team for April 17th, 18th, and 19th. The sign-up sheet is up there. Isadora Lab with Elwers and Sparrows right after this. The panelists there's a panelist meeting, accessibility lab at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, and Saturday, how to make video for your classroom is still listed here. I'm not sure if that's the accurate title. But anyway, thank you all for being here. Thank you to the panelists, without which we cannot do this show. Thank you for all of the people who are watching, our producers. We appreciate your questions. And definitely thank you to all the back-end crew who do make this show possible every day. We're going to run the credits right now. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
Engage warp drive.
Great job, guys. I learned a lot. I didn't know that much about the system beforehand, so well done.
Thanks, Bill.
Looks cool.
We're supposed to whisper at this point of the show.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Looks cool.
I forgot.
A quiet time.
One button whisper time.
The illustration is awesome.
Time for juice and cookies.
And I think we're off to a panelist meeting right now. So bye, everybody. Thank you for participating.